Hi, everybody. Hi, Alyse. Thank you for coming today. Today, Messy to Magical presents the power of breathwork and its relationship with the Enneagram. So, my guest is Alyse Bacine. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
And welcome, and thank you for saying yes. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Yeah, I think we're going to have fun. I love riffing with you about what you do, and we could go on for a very long time, but today we're going to try to keep it to about 40 minutes. Let me just give you a brief bio of Alyse. She's a pioneering trauma expert and creator of the metamorphosis method, a revolutionary approach that bridges clinical expertise with spiritual practice. With over 24 years as a breathwork practitioner and a master's in counseling psychology, she helps clients identify and dissolve their core wounds, creating permanent transformation. Alyse's unique methodology has helped hundreds of women break free from long-standing patterns in relationships, business, and self-worth. She brings profound clarity to the unconscious patterns keeping people stuck and offers a simple practical process for lasting change. Beautiful. So I have to ask you, I ask everybody who comes on my show, what is your superpower?
Well, probably a lot of what you just read. I mean, I think for me, obviously my methodology and my business is a combination of like my experience, my knowledge, and my expertise in the areas of breath work and healing, and also trauma, and my experience with working with traumatized children. But on top of that, I would say I just have a natural ability to be able to see what somebody's core wound is, or their trauma, or like what is at the root of what they're experiencing. And I just am really good at that. So I guess that's my superpower.
I love it. I love it. So I'd love to hear about how, like, what was there a moment or how did you decide I'm going to include breath work into my practice? What happened there where you just had this aha moment?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even necessarily an aha moment for me because I discovered breathwork when I was so young. So I was 19 when I discovered breathwork. So I really, like, was at such a early stage in my life, and so it's something that I've carried with me for so long. So I discovered it when I was 19, and then I started training as a breathwork practitioner when I was 20. So by the time I was 22, I was seeing clients, I was leading groups, and I was teaching breathwork to people. So it's been something that has always been a part of my life for, most for my adult life, basically. So it was never really a question for me as to whether I would include it, because it was always just something that was the main thing that I knew had created such a profound transformation in my life. So, and I knew that it allowed me to have a perspective on life that most people my age didn't have at the time when I was younger. And I just always kind of knew that it was something that set me apart as far as my experience with it. So, when I started my business in 2020, it was just a natural thing. Initially, actually, when I started my business, breathwork was the main focus because that was the thing that I had always done with people. And then from there, it evolved into, as I started working with more and more clients, I developed my signature program, which is called the Metamorphosis. And then I started to see the depths of the trauma piece and the way that people were healing major traumas and wounding from childhood. And that's how I really started to develop more of the trauma piece and really start to articulate that, because that was something that I just naturally did based on, just who I am, but also, my background and my training and my experience. So, that the breath work kind of was like the first piece. And then all of the stuff that I do around trauma and my methodology was kind of developed, as I started to work with more and more people and really understand and articulate my process.
So for those of the people who might be watching today or another day, and they don't know what breath work is, can you tell us a little bit about what that is to you and maybe what it means in general?
Mhm.
And maybe give an example of what that looks like.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different types of breath work. And breath work is, goes back thousands and thousands of years. There's different breath work practices in yoga, like pranayama, and different ways that they use the breath to create different states in the body. So, that idea is ancient. However, more recently, breathwork has become something that a lot of people use to create transformation. The breathwork that I specifically was trained in, back in the early 2000s is called conscious connected breathing. And I learned that from some of the pioneers in the field who had started developing this practice in the 60s and 70s. So, I learned from them, and then I took that knowledge and that experience and kind of developed it into my own way of doing breath work. So the philosophy that I have on it is, and there's a lot out there now. When I started doing breath work, no one really knew what it was, or no one was talking about it. And now it's
Mhm.
like totally different. So the way that I look at it, based on the work that I do around trauma and also just in my experience, is I believe that the body has its own natural wisdom, and the body wants to breathe and move energy in its own way. We just need to give it the space and container to do that. So the breath work that I teach is a lot more about being gentle, simple, and working with the body instead of trying to like force yourself to breathe really hard or really fast. To me, that just never resonated, and it always made me feel worse. So the breath work that I use is really about finding this natural rhythm with your own body and dropping into that. And it's very simple. It's called conscious connected breathing. And it's literally just breathing in and out through the mouth in a circular pattern with no space between the inhale and the exhale. So you're just like getting into a rhythm with your breath. And a lot of things can happen. I can't always predict what's going to happen for people. It ranges from just having a really relaxing experience where you calm your nervous system and drop into your body, and then ranging from experiencing and processing emotions, having old memories come up and clear from the body, accessing the subconscious mind and starting to have deeper awarenesses around limiting beliefs, or why you do what you do, or things from your past that have impacted you. And then sometimes people will have experiences of connecting to their higher selves, connecting to their own creativity, their own infinite wisdom. And then some people will have a lot of more like physical experiences where they have air physically moving in the body and creating physical sensations and stuff like that. So it really just ranges based on what that person needs, but it really is something that creates profound transformation and will give you a ton of momentum in the growth you're wanting to create. Oh wait, did I lose you? Uh-oh, I don't know what happened. I don't know where she went, or if I'm...
Okay, so weird. Okay. Okay. It's weird because mine said that I had the full internet and then lost you. And then I went to another page to see if maybe you texted me and it said I had no internet. So my bad. I apologize. You
That's
were,
okay.
I rarely lose internet. So I apologize for that. So you were explaining the different ranges of experiences that people have from just a relaxing experience to full blown.
Yeah. So, it really will vary based on what experience you need to have at that time. So, I always tell people there's no right or wrong. Like, you can't really go in with an expectation of like, oh, I need to, cry a lot or whatever, because like that might not happen and that's fine. A lot of times things are happening on deeper levels than our conscious mind is aware of. In fact, most of what we're working with when we use the breath work is not happening in the conscious mind. And most of the trauma and the core wound and the things that I work with mostly are not in the conscious mind. It's going to be more of the subconscious. And that's why the breath work is such a powerful tool for that. So yeah, I mean, people will have experiences of, old memories, emotions coming up and shifting. They'll sometimes people have experiences of tapping into their higher self, their creativity, things that they're meant to do, new ideas. Some people have more of like a physical experience where they're feeling sensation in their body, or they might even have something happen where, like, if they have an old injury or something, they'll feel energy moving from that, or they're stuck energy. So it's really a wide range of things that you can't really predict, but it's always like exactly what is supposed to happen. But what I will say is that for all of my clients who are newer to it, when they come in and they start doing it, they will experience profound shifts and results pretty much immediately. Especially if like they're new to it and they haven't done it before. I mean, if they have done it before, they will too, but also like people who are newer to it, they will be like, whoa, I can't believe how much this is shifting things so quickly.
And so do people come to you because they feel like a shift? I never thought I had any trauma in my life. And I was listening to a book by Russ Hudson, and he said, we've all had it, right? It just,
Yeah.
the range, right? So do you think people come to you already with this idea that I need to get past my trauma, or it actually shows them something they, like you said, this unconscious pattern? How do people show up to you? Do you?
I think it's both. I mean, I think that most people, even if they know there are certain things that they might need to get over, they aren't really aware of exactly where it's coming from. So for example, like if someone comes to me and said they don't really think they have trauma, I'll be like, just wait till I get my hands on you, and then you won't be saying that. But a lot of because a lot of it is for, like I said, in the subconscious, and a lot of it is like relational patterns and dynamics from childhood, and also decisions that you made about yourself and the world, what's available to you, what you're capable of, that are based on just what you witness and how you interpreted certain situations that you witnessed in your life. And then also just your level of consciousness and your like the psyche that you took on from your mother. So like a lot of the beliefs and thoughts that you have or things you might be playing out are actually just things you unconsciously took on from her, not even based on what she said or what she did, but just in who she is. Because, I always say kids learn through modeling, and they learn from who we are, not what we say or even really what we do. It's more about who we are, and that's what they really take on. And then kids will identify as that, without even realizing it. So I think that's more of what we're looking at. A lot of it is underneath the surface, things that you probably wouldn't be able to see until, I kind of will talk to you and be like, okay, well, what's going on? What are you experiencing? What's your biggest challenge? What are you trying to create? And then when you kind of tell me what's happening, and then you tell me about growing up, like pretty, like, your parents and stuff, then pretty quickly I'll be able to make the connections and draw the parallels to like how what you're telling me about growing up is showing up now. But it wouldn't necessarily be something you would be aware of, because it's almost like a fish swimming in water, like they don't know they're in water. they just know that's the world,
Right.
so
Right.
kind of like a lens that you're looking at the world through that you're not really aware of. And some people are aware of it to a certain degree. Like, for example, someone might know that they're a people pleaser, right? And it's like, okay, well, I want to stop people pleasing, but you can't just stop people pleasing, because a lot of times we created that people pleasing as a coping mechanism to literally survive. So if someone's like, oh, I'm just not going to people please, there's no way that's going to be a sustainable behavior change, because it's literally going to feel so unsafe to you to not people please that you're going to have to address the reason why it feels so unsafe and why you created that coping mechanism in the first place. So I think a lot of times people will have certain clues like that of like, these are certain things that I do, or, maybe I procrastinate, or maybe I'm a perfectionist, or maybe, I have a fear of putting myself out there, or a fear of being seen, or whatever. So they might have these awarenesses of like what the problem is, and maybe and some people will come in with, a good idea of where it came from, but they just don't know how to change it. So that's what we really do. So I would say it's a range. I think usually people who come to me, they feel stuck in some way, like they feel like they're repeating a pattern in their life in some way, and they're not sure what it is or where it's coming from. And they've tried, a lot of things that people try, and maybe it's worked for a little bit, but it hasn't worked for the long term. And they're just looking for like a long-term solution to really get to the other side. And that's usually where people are at. I mean, it's usually a range, for example, whether it's showing up in their relationship, or it's showing up in their business, or even just the way they feel about themselves, but usually it'll be in one of those places.
So I was listening recently to Russ Hudson's idea of that we're born at a particular point on the Enneagram. That's where we're born, and then we use that coping mechanism to deal with whatever's coming at us, which I thought was interesting because, and actually science has sort of proven that there are 9 personalities for when they've studied babies, that they are just like they are when they're born. So I've been kind of going through, I think I sent you those core wounds and what each type supposedly has. And I was reading mine, which I'm a 5, and it was just so sad. And I didn't feel like this, but when I interpret it the way Russ does, I can see what he's saying. And my core wound supposedly is I received no meaningful interaction, emotion, or affection from caretakers. And I'm thinking, wow. I mean, I thought my mom and dad did a decent job. My sister was very nurturing. But as a 5, I kind of look at the world like everyone is a little off, and I pull back anyway. So,
Mhm.
to say that they didn't get any interaction, it's because it's the perspective, like you said, this lens that I didn't get any meaningful interaction may be somewhat true, but then it's always those degrees of actually getting some or getting none. I mean, right? There is that. So the people pleaser, and there are many of them out there. Women kind of wear that hat. I don't know if they're all people pleasers, but I have found that that's the 2, and they felt loved only if they were helping or pleasing others. And then it seems to me like there are these degrees of that where, yes, their parents were awesome or their parents sucked, and so they become even worse people pleasers.
Mhm.
So I think our levels, what we would call a level of development, is based on trauma, the degrees of trauma that are in our lives. And then we show up as with these temperaments, and then, have to have this structure to protect ourselves, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. And I really think it all comes back to like unmet needs, and that really depends on the person as well. Based on, your personality, or just how you interpret things. And just like your constitution, and the way that you kind of process information. So, when I really look at what is affecting a person and like what really contributed to causing the core wound, we're really looking at unmet needs. Like, what were the needs that you had that your parents weren't capable of meeting, and then how that impacted you and how you internalize that as like a viewpoint or a belief about yourself and the world. So that's really what I look at too, is like a lot of times it's not about like what your parents did. It's just more about like what you needed that they couldn't give you, and that they didn't have the capacity to give you, so it's like not really necessarily about blaming either. And I think, one of
Mhm.
the things that I see that's very challenging for people is, more of the nuance. Like for people who had, for example, a mom who, had like an addiction, or a dad who abandoned them, like that's easy to like see why, that person impacted you. But it's a lot more challenging and more nuanced for the person who did have parents who were present and, loving and caring and there for them, but they're still feeling like, something was missing, or they're still feeling like they didn't get what they needed, or they're still feeling like they have to overgive or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, what's actually happening here? And that's where more of the nuance comes in around like, okay, well, I had this need, for example, to be, valued or acknowledged for my authenticity. And maybe your parents, as loving and wonderful as they were, just weren't able to see that within you and value that within you. So then there was just an unmet need there that caused a wound, because as a child, you're looking to be seen and acknowledged for who you really are. And when you have parents that don't have the capacity to do that, it creates a void. And then it would create a belief about yourself of like, there's something wrong with me, or I'm not good enough, or I'm wrong, or like, the pattern of relating where you feel like you have to be what the other person wants you to be, in order to get like love and connection or whatever. So, and again, it really depends on how that person interprets it. But what I find is, I always say to people, like, you have to be able to hold two perspectives at the same time. Like, you can have parents who you love more than anything, you're grateful for them, and you feel deeply connected to them, and they hurt you in these particular ways. And like, you need to be able to have both of those things be true at the same time. And also, it's not about blaming them at all or making them wrong. It's simply just being able to like acknowledge and face that they didn't have the capacity to give you what you needed, and then to be able to take responsibility for that within yourself and heal and reconcile that within yourself. So I think that's kind of that can be challenging for people. And I see it with so many women where it's hard for them to kind of go there to the depths of like the pain, because it's like, but my mom is great. Like, I love my mom, she did so much for me, or she's so wonderful. And it's like, yes, that's also true. And just because you're saying that this thing hurt you, or like admitting that this thing hurt you, doesn't take away the fact that she is amazing. And it doesn't mean that you're betraying her. It just means that you are taking responsibility for your own experience and reconciling it so that you can move forward.
Sure. Sure. This is, I'm not sure if you've ever thought about this, or have been asked this. I'm curious if you've never ever noticed a difference between a woman whose mother has passed and
Mhm.
her stuff with her mother, compared to if when she was alive, or maybe you didn't know her when she was alive. But because, as I mean, my mother isn't around, and we had a great relationship. But it was actually very liberating to me when she died, because
Yeah,
all of the stuff
I've
that
seen that.
yeah, I was
Sorry.
okay. I was curious because I mean, I'm being pretty vulnerable right now to say
No, it's kind of taboo to say that, and I
it
feel like
is.
people don't want to admit it. But I have walked multiple clients through losing a parent, either a mother or a father, and I find that they have that experience where, and sometimes, I've had to like really walk people through it, because it's kind of hard to admit that, that there's some kind of weight lifted. But, just even from an energetic perspective, it almost feels like, there are certain cords that are cut that are no longer kind of pulling on your energy or having these like energetic attachments to you, and you're able to really let go of a lot of the patterns of relating or the ways of thinking that were kind of holding this like energetic space in your field and in your psyche. And it really allows you to let go of that. And it's not bad. Like, obviously, you love the person and all of that, but I've seen it with multiple people. Like, I've seen like really big shifts in people when they lose a parent, especially if like they're doing this work, right? I think like obviously like some people, and it's funny, I just had someone say that to me. I forget who I was talking to, but it was like in the last couple of days where they were like, yeah, my father passed away. And it was like this amazing experience for me. And she was like, I feel weird saying that. And I'm like, no, I get it. I've seen it with so many people.
Yeah, it's really pretty fascinating. I think actually for my mom's passing, it's been many years, 26, yeah, 26 years. That was sort of the beginning of my spiritual journey because I raised a Catholic, didn't want to disappoint her, had all this stuff, right? And then she was gone. And I thought, okay, now I'm sort of free to do whatever I want. And I just started exploring, different ways of how I wanted to live my life, especially from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I am going through your money program, and
Mhm.
you talk often about the relationship with mom, my mother, and all that. And it's been really fascinating because she was the one who said, my ship will come in. We're waiting for our ship to come in. I actually thought literally a ship was going to show up with a bunch of money. Right. So, but I was fed these stories and this scarcity. And it's been really interesting to work through. I'm only maybe a third through, but I have to tell you, it's been really fascinating for me to contemplate. First of all, what do I feel when I have a money trigger? What,
Mhm.
that I wanted to purchase something, or I did purchase something and now I have to get this money. And that it's a very funny thing to get really in touch with. Where is that in my body? What was the messaging I got? How can I shift that messaging? So I want to thank you for that. And maybe it's a little bit of a plug for you, but it's been really, I've never thought of what my mom taught me and what her relationship with money was, that it could have affected me. So
Yeah.
I know I've looked through your programs. Can you tell me a little bit about, is it always mama? I mean, is it
Not
always?
always, but
Okay.
so here's how I look at it. So your relationship with your mom is really going to create an imprint for relationships. And that means relating to the world, relating to yourself, relating to other people. So, it's really going to create an imprint on how you love, how you give love, how you receive love, how comfortable you feel with that, your own feelings of worthiness and deservingness and all of that. And also, I think one of the most important things too is, like I mentioned earlier, we take on our mother's psyche and her consciousness. So, and if you think about it, it's not rocket science. You literally are developing inside of her and being grown out of her cells. And what are cells? Their energy, their consciousness, right? So it's not a big leap to realize that, right? Is totally like and obviously we're our own people with our own souls and our own lives, but at the same time, there is a lot that we unknowingly take on from our mothers. And there's a lot of enmeshment that we can have with our mothers, like where we don't necessarily know what is hers or what's ours, simply because at one point we were one with her. Like, so that is, that can be confusing at times, especially on an emotional level. And especially if you're somebody that, could sense that maybe she was hurt or traumatized or was dealing with something, and you would have then took on the responsibility of wanting to help or make it better or fix it. And from that lens too, we'll find a lot of like enmeshment as far as emotions and feeling responsible for other people, and all of those types of things will create imprints in how we relate to people in general. So I mean, when we're looking at your mother, yes, I would say, in my certification program where I teach my methodology, I always tell people, like, that's where we start, right? We start with their relation with their mom, because that's really going to tell you a whole hell of a lot. Even if their mom left and was never there, well, that's the thing then, So I think that, yes. And then also, birth story is kind of like very much related to that. It's just more of this deeper unconscious energetic imprint. So when I say birth story, I'm referring to the circumstances surrounding your birth from conception to 3 months. So, really just what were the circumstances? Like, what was your mom feeling? Was this a happy thing? Was this an accident? Was she with your father? Were they excited? Were they fighting? Did she feel scared? Like, what was going on
Are you
when you?
talking about those from gestation to 3 months in utero, or not to? Or are you talking about the year, the 3 months after you're born? You're talking.
Yeah, no, like 3 months old. So basically, from when you were
Okay.
conceived until you were born after three
At
months old.
3 months.
3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that first year.
Yeah,
Essentially.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's going to create a lot of just like energetic imprints on you around like just what kind of place you think the world is, and also like the patterns of energy that are running in your mother's body are going to be the patterns of energy that run in your body, so yeah, so
There's such a huge responsibility there.
it's okay. Don't like.
I've had 5 of them, so I'm thinking, okay, I screwed that one. I screwed this one up.
No, don't. I know people say that to me all the time. I literally think that's probably the biggest question I get is, how do I not fuck up my kids? Or like, how do I not? And I'm always like, don't worry about it, because like, and I say this as a mental health professional that spent years working with children and families. The only thing you can do to impact your children is to do your own personal growth work. They will benefit, they will feel it, even if they're not conscious of it, it will impact them. So,
I love that. What great advice that is. That is similar when we've talked about these things in my Enneagram coaching certification about object relations and attachment and frustration and rejection, and you're just saying, oh my god, I mean, did I really do this to my kids? And the person said something very similar, which is, yes, we all have to have a personality, we need ego to live in this world, but our job is to help our children be the healthiest version of themselves. And to your point, that's what that happens. Like, doing your work allows you to show up and be healthy for your kids.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
and most of the time kids, like, until they like move out of the house, pretty much they don't really have an awareness of any of this stuff anyway. Like, they're not thinking in these terms. Their brain isn't developed to the point that you could even say like, "Oh, I'm dealing with this." Like, they're really not thinking in that way yet anyway. So the best thing you can do is just model, healthy ways of processing your emotions, taking accountability, if you say something wrong or mean or whatever, and then just model like doing the work and valuing yourself enough to, continue to do the work on yourself. So to me, that's the biggest thing. So yeah, so just to answer your question, does it always come back to the mom? I mean, kinda. I could
Okay.
try to
Okay.
pretend the answer is different, but I would be lying. I mean, your dad does impact you too, but it's not going to be as much as your mother. It's just not.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So let's get back to breath work for a moment, because
Okay.
I'm curious about, so with the three-centered practice that we do in the Enneagram, it's gut, heart, and head, right?
Mhm.
And it's a 7-minute practice where we spend 2 minutes in our belly, like being mindful of what the body feels like, being mindful of, or heartful of what the heart is going on, trying to clear our heads, integrating all three. And I have to tell you, during your money workshop program,
Mhm.
when I think about a trigger, I I I feel it in like back behind in my shoulders, and I think, I wonder if that's where my mother felt it, or, but it's really, I never had noticed it. I never ever gave it any thought or consideration. So in between sessions, do you tell people just to continue with the breath work, and what kind of exercises do you give to them so that they can really get in touch with what is going on in their bodies or hearts? And
Yeah. So like the way that I work with people in the metamorphosis, for example, is you get access to all of the tools and the content, in like online in a portal. So you have access to all of it. And then based on what is happening for you, I'll kind of direct you to do different things. So, if you're working through like the birth stuff, then we'll kind of be talking about that. And I will say, like, okay, go do the birth story breath work again. Cause I have breath work sessions that are like for very specific different things, like
Okay.
the mother wound, the father wound, the sibling wound, the birth story. There's like forgiveness. There's a lot. There's a lot. So I'll like direct them to do a specific breathwork session where I'm kind of talking them through a specific thing. And then I'll have them come back and tell me what's going on. And then, once we've gotten to the point where I've been able to really powerfully distill down what their core wound is, then what we do is my inner child healing process, which is basically a very simple process that I've developed to be able to notice when your inner child is triggered in a situation. So like, for example, if it's, in your relationship, it's like, you think your partner is criticizing you all the time. And it's like when you feel criticized by your partner, it's like actually not them. It's your inner child who feels, not valued or not good enough or whatever. So you learn how to be able to see every situation through that lens. And then once you know that your inner child's triggered, it's a process that you go through to essentially develop this relationship with this part of you, acknowledge, heal, and reconcile the inner child so that you can pretty much go from feeling triggered in a situation or feeling, stuck or challenged or scared to accessing your power within minutes once you get really good at it. And it really has to do with, acknowledging, developing a relationship with your inner child, feeling the emotions, doing the breath work, doing the journaling, and eventually you get to the point where you can go through the steps very quickly. It takes longer in the beginning because you have to like understand and learn it. So that's pretty much the crux of what I'm doing with people, is helping them through that process of being like, if they're like, hey, this thing came up, or, this thing came up with a client or something, and I don't know what to do, or I feel this way. Oops, sorry. Just want to put my phone on do not disturb. And then I would be like, okay, well, here's what's actually happening. So your inner child is feeling unacknowledged. Okay. And then, I'll kind of walk them through the process, help them go through the inner child healing process, use the breath work. Like I have a breath work that's specifically for that. And then, depending on kind of where they're at with that, I'll walk them through it until they come out on the other side. And then, gradually things just start to shift for people. So I'm really kind of navigating the tools with people based on where they're at and what they need, just depending on, what's happening for them. But yeah, so I'm really just kind of telling people like, okay, like for example, I have a private client right now who's working through some stuff around her daughter. And, right now we're really working on connecting the experience she's having right now to how she felt growing up. And, so I'm kind of continuing to give her the practices to like open that door, because it's kind of, a hard one for her. So each day I'm like, okay, like do this breath work again, do journaling as this. And then, I kind of talk her through it. And then we come back and she tells me what happened. And then I'm like, okay, do this. And so that's how I kind of work, is really just, and the way that I work with everybody, whether it's in my group program or private work, is I like to talk to you almost every day. And the reason why is because I want to be able to walk you through what's coming up in real time, instead of you having to wait like a week to get on a call with me when then it's not like alive for you anyway. Like, because the whole point of my process is to be able to navigate triggers in real time and be able to know, like address what is actually happening instead of what you think is happening. So what you think is happening is, this thing happened in your business or your partner is being rude or whatever, but what's actually happening is your inner child is triggered. So when you learn how to navigate things that way, things become a lot easier, and, all areas of your life open up. So that's why I like to talk to people every day, because they move a lot faster that way, and they can start to understand how to do the practice much easier. So Did that answer your
Yeah.
question? Like I just went
Yes.
off.
Yes. You didn't. No, you didn't. I like that you, even though you have it all out there in your program, that you are customizing it based on whatever's going on in your client's life. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I
for
like,
sure.
well, you're also a therapist. So, I mean, do you call yourself a therapist?
I mean, I have that background and
Mhm.
training, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really beautiful. I love the work that you're doing. And I appreciate you taking time today to teach me a little bit more about that and riff a little bit about how the Enneagram might tie into that. Of course, I always try to sneak that in. But
Yeah.
and I actually didn't even get to asking you if you were discovering, I wanted to, a pattern. And I think I had asked this last time we were talking, a pattern in the childhood wounds that you can see that, oh, that person has that and this one. But certain people have certain wounds that they are
Mhm.
basically, there aren't 50 wounds. There are probably.
There's not. I mean, I would say there's probably about between 5 and 10 when you really like distill it down.
Mhm.
But it's, they show up differently in different people. So like, for example, like I'm not good enough could show up in me as I like procrastinate because I'm scared that everything I do is not going to be good enough. So I don't do anything. And it could show
Mm.
up in you as I overperform and make sure I over succeed. I'm overly successful to prove that I'm good enough. Right. So like
Right. Right.
it could be the same thing, but it plays out differently in different people based on, their personality or their upbringing or just circumstances. And, there's so many different factors. Obviously, the Enneagram and then like we have astrology, human design, all the things that it's funny. I always say like there's all these things across the board with humans that are the same, but yet everybody is such an individual that
Crazy.
everything has like these X factors that you can't really like predict, So
Totally, totally.
just
And I think it's one of the hangups that people have with the Enneagram is, oh, I'm more than a number. I said that before I even knew anything about it. But
Mhm.
that's what the Enneagram teaches you is, yes, you're a lot more than a number. So, but
Yeah, and
once
it's
you
just
know
like
that number, it helps you see things you didn't see before.
exactly. It's a really powerful tool to be able to understand your energy and the way that you see things, and also to like not make yourself wrong for certain things that maybe you didn't like about yourself or you thought should be different. It's like, oh, well, this is why I'm like this. So it gives you like a sense of, like self acceptance too, I think.
Which is so important, that the
Yeah.
beginning of really awareness, self-acceptance, self-compassion. I mean, if you can't have it for you, how are you going to have it for anybody else? So,
Yeah.
right.
It's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
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 Well, thank you again. I'm glad we got to riff on this. I'm super sorry about all the technical stuff that was going on. It
It's
never
okay.
happens,
It
but
happens.
maybe my mom was trying to send me a message or something.
Oh, yeah, that could be.
All right. Thank you so much, Alyse.